If you're doing our level system, you might look at the board and think, FunMasterMike, I just did the two bishops checkmate. How hard could the bishop and knight mate be? It's a piece of cake. Actually, no, there's no sugary sweets on ChessKid. We only have healthy food here. In fact, the bishop and knight mate is a little bit more like Brussels sprouts. Yeah, pretty hard to swallow when you're a kid, but strangely when you become an adult, you start to like them. Yeah, I can't explain it. Let's take a look at some pro tips for how to do the bishop and knight mate. In fact, FunMasterMike has got a whole bunch of them. If you memorize them, make your life a lot easier. First of all, the checkmate has to occur on the same color corner as your bishop. We've got a white squared bishop, so we have to checkmate the black king on one of the white square corners. We're actually going to pick the A8 one today. Number two, the king always moves in a straight line. So if you're white, your king is slowly going to advance, staying on the 6th rank the entire time. I don't know why that is. It's just the way it works out. Number three, your knight is going to move in the shape of a capital W. That's right. The knight's going to go here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and then here. You just have to trust me on this one. The knight is making a W, although my arrows make it a little bit hard to follow. The knight never touches the 6th or the 8th ranks. And the last pro tip, your knight is in charge of guarding all of the dark squares on the 8th rank. Your bishop's in charge of guarding all the light squares on the 8th rank. Now that was a whole mouthful before we've made the first move. Let's see all of these elements come together. The correct first move is to reroute your knight to attack that first dark square. And you already know where the knight belongs. He belongs on G5. Black only has one legal move, and now it's time for the knight to guard the dark square. Just like in the ending of the two bishops checkmate, the way to get the king to go where you want him to go, which is this corner, is to make sure he can't go to the other corner. So, knight f7, and black is walking the way we want him to go. King to f8. The next square to make sure the black king cannot move to is this square, which is a light square. Now, do not be tempted to play knight h6. That actually violates two of FunMasterMike's golden rules. Number one, the knight is not moving in that consistent W shape. And number two, remember, this is a light square, which means the bishop is in charge of guarding that square. So, bishop to h7, and here comes the king. King to e8. It's time to call a big timeout. This is probably the most confusing position, the one that definitely took FunMasterMike many times to master when I was a wee chess kid. I pretty much would always try to play the move king e6. Why? Well, because it felt a little bit weird to let the black king off the back row. Now, I know not to play the move bishop to f5 to guard that square because the king would just walk back and the bishop was in charge of the g8 square. So again, that's why I would pretty much always play king to e6 growing up. But then you know what? Black's king would move here and he would get out and I would never be able to finish off the checkmate. So let's go back to this position. This is a weird one, but what you have to do is you have to trust the process. Remember how our knight started here? And went here, and went here. It's actually the knight that's in charge of guarding the d7 square. So what does that mean? The knight continues his path and plays the move knight to e5. Now life is actually pretty simple if black's king goes to f8, because then we play knight check, the king moves over, we slide our king over, and the process continues pretty easily. I'm going to make our life a little bit more difficult by letting the black king off the back row. In this position, instead of the black king walking toward the corner, he's going to play king to d8. And there's a little trick that my coach taught me growing up that I'm going to pass along to you. This is a 3-step process. We're going to move our pieces from slowest to fastest. Okay, now, quick quiz. What's the slowest piece we have on the chessboard? Well, that would be the king. He only goes one square at a time. And if it's a king move, you know where the king has to move because I already told you the king is only going to move along the 6th rank. So king to e6 must be the correct move. Now again, we're not that worried about king to e8. We'll just play knight to d7 and cut off the king's escape to the wrong corner. The more challenging move is king to c7. Remember our slowest to fastest? Who's the middle fastest piece? Well, that would be the knight. The bishop can cross the board all in one turn. The king was the slowest, the knight is the second slowest. And we don't have to guess where the knight goes because he's following our pattern. He went here, and then here, and then here. So trust the process, chess kids. It must be knight to d7. It looks like the black king is getting out. I know it looks uncomfortable. It's a weird one. You do have to let the king out of the back row. He's going to play king to c6. Now, his only escape square to move down the board is b5. Our fastest piece has been waiting. That's the bishop. How does the bishop guard b5? Well, that's pretty simple chess at this point. Bishop to d3. Black's king has to walk backward. And now bishop to e4. And look at this clever little idea. Our king guards this square, our bishop these two squares, our knight this square. It's like we made a little cup around the black king, and the cup does not overfloweth. The black king has to walk back to the 8th rank almost like magic. Let's pick the d8 square. Now we can seal him on the back rank by playing king to d6, and he's right back where we want him. King to e8. Which piece is in charge of guarding light squares? That's the bishop. So bishop to g6. It's got to be the bishop. King to d8. Okay, that's a dark square. Which piece is in charge of guarding the dark squares? Well, that's the knight, and you already know the knight's path. The knight has to continue on his journey by playing knight c5. King to c8. Bishop to h5 is actually a nice little waiting move, because when the king goes back to d8, then we can play knight to b7 check perfectly. The waiting move helped us there. King to c8, our king slides over to c6. The king goes to b8. If you want to keep that king on the back row, you'll play king to b6, because if he tries to escape, king to c8 will happen. But that's a light square. Our bishop's in charge of those squares. Bishop to g4 check, king to b8. And now comes the final countdown. We can actually forget about the rules that we've talked about so far. We might have to break one or two of them to go for the checkmate. But in any case, this is a dark square. Which piece is in charge of the dark squares? The knight. Now we've got 3 different squares we can attack the b8 square from. But if we use this square or this square, that could get in the way of our bishop. So surprisingly, this is the best square to attack b8 with. And to route your knight there, you're going to play knight to c5. King to a8. Be careful, as in all of these endgames, stalemates can be possible. Don't play knight to a6 right away. That'd be stalemate. So another waiting move. Bishop to f5. King to b8. And now it's time for a mate. Knight to a6 check. Notice if you'd actually gone the other way, that would block the bishop and the king could escape. So knight to a6 is more accurate. The king moves to a8. And it is finally time for a mate. The bishop is pretty much always the checkmating piece because the king landed on the same color corner as the bishop. Bishop to e4 is mate. Chess kids, this endgame is very, very tricky. The important things to remember are to trust the processes that we learned about where the king, knight, and bishop move, and also repeat, repeat, repeat. FunMasterMike did not master this the first 5 or 10 times he did it. It took many, many tries, just like Brussels sprouts. Trust me, you'll come to like them later in life.